Familia de Lucha Libre Online y el Calza, aquí te habla Pedro Vega, and I'm here, formerly known as Glacier in WCW days, the legend. He's a movie star. He did some absolute great stuff in WCW wrestling, martial arts, everything you gotta know it. Ray Lloyd is here in Lucha Libre Online. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you, man.
Yeah, it's an absolute honor, sir, having you here, Lucha Libre Online. So, first, I want to talk to you about your martial arts background. You started out martial arts. Can
Yeah.
How can you adapt martial arts and wrestling at the same time?
Well, when I grew up in South Georgia, in a town, a beachfront town called Brunswick, Georgia, and it was about an hour north of Jacksonville, Florida, which is where I ended up watching a lot of pro wrestling as a kid, which was championship wrestling from Florida, obviously with Dusty Rhodes and all the great names there. But like most people of my time frame, I have a twin brother. My twin brother and I, the way we got started with and got interested in martial arts was like everybody around that age. We watched the Bruce Lee movie and we thought, man, that's cool. We want to learn how to do that, and so my parents were in law enforcement. My dad in particular, and so he started looking around for what he felt would be a qualified school for us to learn, and then he found one with two other local law enforcement uh, personnel that taught there. And so I started with them, and their names were Frank Graves and Bob Natsky. And I had no idea that they would become such a huge force in my life. They're my two main instructors. Because of them, I was able to go, really all over the world and learn from other great martial arts instructors. But they've always been my rock. The two I started with, and they're both still alive to this day. They're both in their early 80s, and I still wouldn't tangle with either one of them, but but um, but I started actually. I realized when I was playing high school football how much it helped me. Martial arts helped me in football, and to not rely just on my strength and power. And then so once I broke into wrestling, I actually started to try to incorporate it in some of my training. I didn't actually bring it into the ring really until I actually years later when I would become Glacier is when I really first started,
Yes.
combining martial arts with pro wrestling.
So your early days was in the National Wrestling Alliance as Sugar Ray Lloyd. What can you
Yeah.
recall those days in NWA, and how was that run in NWA?
Well, I worked, just here and there for some of the NWA affiliate, promotions that were in the Southeast, particularly in Georgia. And I broke in April of 1987. So here we are in April 2024. And if my math is correct, it's about 37 years I've been actively involved in the wrestling business. So I grew up watching the NWA, being a huge fan of the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance. And ironically, I because of my relationship with Dusty, that where I met Dusty in WCW, and then of course became really really close to Dusty when he started Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling in
Yes.
2000 and all. But through Dusty, through my love of National Wrestling Alliance and his connections, um, he actually was the one who orchestrated for me to have a match at the NWA for the NWA World Tag Team Titles, which I, along with my tag team partner at the time, Jason Sugarman, we actually won and didn't hold the titles for very long, but it didn't matter to me. But it's still in the wrestling almanac that I was one half of the NWA World Tag Team Champs, and
Yes.
I can't tell you how thrilled I am still to this day that I can say that.
Yes. Yes. That's a history. Nobody can delete it right now.
That's
Um,
right.
we know you work like high school assistant coach for
Yeah.
Baldosa High School. And
Yes.
in that time, you were getting trained by Mr. Wrestling, Bob Armstrong. What can you recall about those those days when you were like the student learning from the wrestling business and learning wrestling? What can you recall about Bob Armstrong?
Well, and just to clarify, the Bob didn't really train me, but what Fred Avery, who was a journeyman wrestler, a great independent wrestler, was the one who actually trained me. But uh, through Fred, I ended up working for a great Georgia promoter who ran a promotion called Georgia Peach State Wrestling, and it was his name was Ben Masters, and Ben brought in a lot of the legendary wrestlers from the Southeast. Mr. Wrestling number two, Bob Armstrong, those were two of the main ones. Ted Oates, who's of the Oates brothers, so through that working with Peach State Wrestling, I got to learn from just watching hands-on, Bob Armstrong wrestling to and those legendary wrestlers, and learn from them and get advice from them, get critique from them. So even though Bob never really, he didn't necessarily officially train me, he certainly mentored me like a lot of the legends did to a lot of the younger guys during that time. But I will say this is that I went on to become great friends with all the Armstrong brothers, and still am. And just saw Road Dogg recently at the Royal Rumble weekend in Tampa, and we got a chance to catch up. But the funny thing is, it's in the wrestling business. It's funny how when you typically meet someone at their stage in their career, whatever name they go by at that point is typically a name that sticks with you throughout your relationship with them. And my point for saying that is Bob always, until the last day that I saw him, always referred to me as Sugar Ray. He never called me
Sugar Ray.
Glacier, always, because that's what he knew me as when I first broke in. And and all the Armstrong brothers always referred to me the same thing, which I thought was just really cool, because it allowed me to be reminded that of my roots and where I came from, and how humbling that experience was, and that they thought enough of me back then to still continue to call me that, which was pretty special.
Um, I got to say big names, but there's one name in particular you work with in your early days in WCW. He's a Hall of Famer in WWE. He's the great Muta.
Oh
What
yeah.
can you recall about working with a legend in Japan, in WWE, WCW, Hall of Famer? What can you recall those early days?
Michael, I'll tell you, it's a great story, and I'll certainly give the condensed version of it. But I was wrestling in the independent scene with Georgia, a lot with Peach State Wrestling, and one of the other veteran wrestlers that I was working with, along with Bob Armstrong at Wrestling Two, was Wildfire Tommy Rich, who's former NWA World Heavyweight Champ. Tommy took a real liking to me. I think he saw some potential in me. So I broke in April of '87. This was the summer of '89. So basically, 2 years after I broke in, I was still very, very green. But he saw something in me, and he asked, and I was teaching school and wrestling, at night and weekends, and I had my summer off, that coming summer off. And so he said, well, hey, look, if I could get you an opportunity to wrestle some, with it just become WCW. It was NWA, and it become WCW, on
Mhm.
WTBS. And basically, I jumped at the chance, even though it kind of terrified me at that point. And so my very first match was on a Sunday night in Albany, Georgia, against Butch Reed, which was terrifying enough. So, and luckily I survived that. Everything went well, and so I got offered to go to the TV taping. I believe it was that Wednesday at Center Stage in Atlanta. So only a few days later, and that was my first TV taping ever for WCW, my first time ever in what will become a legendary arena, which is a Center Stage. And then and my first TV match ever was against Smuda. And so it was exciting and terrifying at the same time. But it was
So
awesome.
you're
It went great, and I had some great matches with him after that.
So the evolve now that you gain in WCW as Glacier, I
Yes.
have recall you had one of the coolest entrance, really blue
Oh,
lights, like snow falling off the ceiling. One
yeah.
of the best scenographies of that time I can
Yes.
recall. And you wore a helmet, like you said, 400 years old.
Yeah. It's yeah.
So, can you recall those days as Glacier in WCW? You have a similar, like the Mortal Kombat of Sub-Zero.
Yes, absolutely. And that was, of course, the as they say in professional wrestling, professional wrestling certainly plays off of what's popular in society, and so during that time, Mortal Kombat was extremely popular, and ironically
Yes.
still is,
Yes.
but it was first starting then. The video game was unbelievably popular. The first movie had just come out, and so WTBS. I don't know if you remember or not, but there was a short-lived Mortal Kombat TV series that was broadcast on TBS. So that
Yes.
was kind of their way of thinking was, hey, this seems to be working really well. Why can we bring that Mortal Kombat type look and feel to the wrestling ring? And so, fortunately, things worked out to where I became the first of four people that would become part of the Blood Runs Cold, kind of storyline. And of course, I became Glacier. So a part of that from the beginning was, and it's like I tell any young wrestler, is when you're creating your persona, or if you want to say character, the best way to really get to know that persona is to write your backstory. What's your backstory? If you don't know your backstory, then you're just out there, you know, kind of flailing in the wind. You really need to know what. And I always say there's three options you have when you create your backstory. It can be totally fiction. You can make it up, totally make it up, or it can be completely factual, completely true, or it can be a combination of both, which is what I did with Glacier. I took some of my factual, family experiences, and then I took some fictional Mortal Kombat type theme, and we put it together. So part of that was the helmet, the old helmet, and that kind of became like our title, so to speak, that we kind of fought over. So there was a symbol of something that was physical and tangible that the audience could see, and so that was kind of the significance of having that helmet in the beginning.
So now we're fast forwarding, like right now, you're a co-founder in the Nightmare Factory. You're a coach there right now. And you talked to me about working with Dusty in the old days. Now you're working with Dustin, that is the natural in AEW. You have Cody Rhodes and now the undisputed WWE champion. He
Yeah,
finished his story for for his father. What
yeah,
can you talk to me about these younger stars that are coming to the Nightmare Factory? You're
yeah.
coaching them. They're getting the like in a big scenario like WWE or AEW. What can you talk to me about those young stars that want to live that big experience?
Well, and just to kind of just to clarify on that as well, QT Marshall and I actually we started when we originally started the school in Atlanta, Georgia, actually under the roof of my one of my mentors, Chip Smith, who's one of the most well-known and well-respected sports trainers, out there for sports-specific training. He's trained tons of NFL athletes, more NFL athletes than anybody. He had a huge 30,000 square foot facility where we were able to put the school in the beginning. So QT and I started at first. It was called One Fall Power Factory, and then
Oh,
eventually Cody eventually came into the picture. And so obviously with Cody having the popularity and the success that he was having, we thought it was a great idea to rebrand it. And of course that's how we became the Nightmare Factory. And I was going back and forth in coaching because I live in Orlando, and I had actually moved up there for several months to coach full time. And then I actually just decided to move back to Orlando for some personal reasons. And so I don't actively coach there right now, but I certainly, whenever I'm up in the Atlanta area, obviously, that's some place I consider home. But yeah, but being able to work with that next generation of as I always say, dreamers, and I say that because I was a dreamer, that when I went to this, I dreamed of, what it would be like to get to that top level. And just to be able to pass along so much of this valuable knowledge, Michael, that I was so unbelievably fortunate to learn from some of the very, very best. And I just feel like, that's one of the lessons that I learned along the way is, if you don't share it with people, then it just dies with you. And that doesn't do anybody any good. So it's
yes.
my moral obligation to share it with that next generation and let them know, hey, I was fortunate enough to learn from Dusty Rhodes, the legendary Lou Thesz, learn from guys like Larry Zbyszko and Tonga Fafita, as the world knows as Haku. Learn
Yes.
from some of the very best legendary names and figures in our industry, and then pass along what they taught me in hopes that it can help someone else.
So now I need to talk to you about your acting career. So you were
Yeah, yeah,
in series like Burn Notice, Walking Texas Ranger. You did like you went to the MGM studios on Disney. You did like the German flight engineer in Indiana Jones. I need to know about that.
yeah.
How did it became like you're going to the industry of acting?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and to start with, the Walker Texas Ranger, I auditioned for it, and I made it through a couple rounds, but didn't end up getting it. It was a role that I think they were looking to maybe add a recurring role, and but it was a great experience to audition for it because I was such a Chuck Norris fan, like a lot of martial arts fans, a lot of action fans, basically. But it that was early in my career, so that it certainly inspired me and motivated me to keep going. And yes, my mom was a really talented theater actress that she kind of did as her hobby. But when I watched her as a kid, I knew that if she had wanted to pursue it full time, she would have been great at it. So I always credit my mom with getting the bug to be a performer. But when I moved to Atlanta in 1990, I had decided that I wanted to try to maybe do some work in front of the camera. And ironically, Rick Allen, who wrestled in WWF for quite a while as Sunny Beach, he actually uh, got a role on No Holds Barred, the Hulk Hogan's movie, and they were filming in
Ooh,
Atlanta. And
yes.
so Rick actually got me on as I was basically like a featured extra in the underground bar scene where Stan Hansen and Joe LeDuc fight. And so that was my first feature film that I worked on, and it really just motivated me to want to do more of that. So I kept on studying, taking acting classes. I would get roles from time to time, and yes, for a brief period of time, I think around '04, I moved down to Orlando and I did audition and did just a brief period of time at the Indiana Jones stunt show and injured my knee, and so had to step away from that. But I tell you what, it was a great
Oh.
experience the time that I was there. I met some great people. It's just an unbelievable experience.
So now we're in the present and
Yeah,
we're gonna talk about this new movie you're having, The
yeah,
Unbreakable Brunch. Pro
yes.
wrestlers against Martians against oh my God, you have Diamond Dallas Page with you. You have Haku, part of the
Yeah,
bloodline. You
yeah,
had so many friends of you of the legends in WWE in wrestling history.
yeah,
What can you recall about this movie and what can you talk to me about this new film
yes.
in theaters this Friday in some
This Friday,
theaters?
April 19th. Yeah,
And
were very fortunate to partner with Imagine Theaters, and they're in the Upper Midwest. They're in the five states of Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois. And all the information about the film can be found at our website, which is theunbreakablebunchmovie.com. And on all of our social media, you just have to search the Unbreakable Bunch movie. But yeah, we this film is basically I always say it's the Magnificent Seven or a more modern version of the Expendables meets They Live, the John Carpenter movie with Roddy Piper. So it's put those two worlds together and with a bunch of legendary pro wrestlers, and it's a real fun movie, Michael. That it's been a long journey. Me and my co-producer Luther Wilson, who we Luther wrestled for years as Luther Biggs, and we met at the WCW power plant back in '96. And about 10 years ago, we had this idea of we wanted to make a movie that was a real fun ride that made people feel good about loving pro wrestling the way we love it. And so I think we really hit the mark with the movie, and we're really proud of it. And yes, like you said, we're in distribution. We're in the final stages of getting our distribution deal in place, and we're hoping for it to be out on all the streaming services around the first part of July. So maybe I can come back on maybe as we get closer to that and promote that a little bit.
so I want to have one last question before you go because I know you're
Sure.
busy.
No,
So
no, no.
what
Thank
can
you for the time.
no, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
It's an absolute honor having you here. What can you recall of creating magic in this movie? What experience can you relate during the creation of this awesome movie?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. And I can say this, that one, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, Michael. It really is. And that's saying a lot because I've done a lot of hard, challenging things in my life. But we actually started filming the movie before the pandemic. And then, of course, when all that happened, we literally shut down for almost 2 years, and then we had to come back, and we had a a big cast and crew that we had to try to get everyone back together. So it's been a long journey to get this movie together and get it out there. So I'm really really proud of all of the team that's been able to do that. But the thing is that we not only learned, it was reaffirmed to us as we were making the movie of why we made the movie, and that is that we didn't feel like there's a wrestling movie out there that really shows what that side of the industry that we know really exists, which is the side of the guys and the girls that are in this industry, the camaraderie and the friendship and the loyalty that those people have for each other, that you become like a family. And a good healthy family too. I mean, everybody kind of has their distinct personalities, and but it's there's a part of the business that really never gets shown, and that is the part of uh like I said, the brotherhood of it, where you show that these guys may be all completely different personalities, but when they come together, they're an unstoppable force, and they're going to watch each other's backs. They're going to stand side by side, and they're going to stand up for each other, and to stand up for what's right. And so, even though that may sound a little cliche, because it is an action sci-fi movie, but the film itself is our gift to the wrestling world. Anyone who loves professional wrestling, this movie is a gift to them, because we wanted to make a movie that made people feel proud about loving professional wrestling, and that's what I feel like we were really able to do.
So, sir, I'm gonna say something in Spanish for our people here in Lucha Libre
Sure.
Online. The Unbreakable Brunch van a estar en algunos cines disponibles. Él espera tener mayormente este julio en todas las plataformas posibles para que nosotros podamos disfrutar de la película. Una película única, una película que se van a identificar mucha gente en el mundo de la lucha libre. Así que no se pueden perder esta joya que va a estar saliendo en algunos cines este viernes 19 de abril. The Unbreakable Brunch. Ray Lloyd, sir, thank you for your time here at Lucha Libre Online. It's an absolute honor having you now that you got a big movie this Friday coming.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate so much you having me on, and I know too that I know you talked with our good friend John Crowther, and I actually John is writing my book. I know he was on your show promoting when he wrote the Sheepherders book. So as we get closer to the book coming out, I certainly would love to come back on and talk to you again some more about that, and just wrestling overall, because I love the world of pro wrestling.
So we're gonna get in touch so we can talk about that book. So thank you again for your time, sir. It's an absolute honor having you here.
Thank you. It's my honor. I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.